work is literally other people telling you how valuable you are. Most women decline opportunities to speak publicly or be featured in any type of content. This is your life, you get to live it once. And I think no is a full sentence, and that's enough. And you don't need to apologize for the facts. When you have your priorities sort of shifted like that, it just forces you to make quick decisions. I sort of said to myself, actually, I need 10 rejections to get one yes, so I better get working on the 10 rejections pretty soon.
How has that changed the way that you define success?
Oh my gosh.
Welcome to Women Who Lead. This is the podcast that I wish I'd had when I was a woman in leadership just starting out. So my friends, I have done you a big favor. I have selected some of the most inspiring women in leadership, and I've assembled them in a series of conversations where they're going to share their tips, tricks, frameworks, stories, everything to support you to bloom into the next season of your career. Welcome to Women Who Lead, and I am thrilled to have our next guest with you today because Michelle is quite literally phenomenal. So first of all, hello Michelle and welcome.
Hello Ruth, thank you for having me.
I'm very happy that you're here because Michelle is one of those women that as soon as I met you, just felt like being in your energy, your grace, your poise, like it was intoxicating. And I was like, I have to know her. And we haven't seen each other so very much, but I've made sure that we've stayed connected along the way.
That's so nice. Thank you for saying that. But I think also I love the energy that you put into the world and the way that you lift other people up. And I'm just happy to be in your orbit.
Oh, well, look at us. Hey, gang, look, we're this like little fangirly society over here. But let's dive right in. Something I always love to ask people is, what does it mean to you to be in bloom in life and work?
Looking back at, professionally, personally in the past, I just feel like my entire world has been blown open because I became a mother last year. Looking back on it and the things that worried me at the time, the things that I would sort of stay awake at night ruminating over, all of it, I've had a complete change in perspective in life, and I feel like it can be many things for many people, but for me, sort of taking time out and sort of resetting, and also having a really confronting experience with identity, who I am, my own sort of insecurities and potential like obsolescence when you're coming back to work, all of that just sort of hits you in the face again. And I think being in bloom is just sort of realizing your own power and sort of what the art of the possible is for yourself after you've gone away and then come back.
I love that because what's in my mind is like this moment of like discarding all the stuff, all the accumulated like belief systems, worries, concerns, and then really connecting into the essence of what life is. And so tell us more about that, like this journey that you've been on, or that you're on actually, of embracing, I guess, the essence of who you are versus who you thought you needed to be in order to be successful.
The best way I heard it described was a forcing function. And a forcing function can be so many things in life, right? It can be sort of starting a new job, moving to a new city, but I think we all need to sort of seek out things that become forcing functions in our lives. And I think for me, coming back to work and sort of going through all of that has really just made it crystal clear what's important. And also not worrying too much about how other people sort of take that energy or how they interpret it, because that's a them thing. And then there's, I need to focus on, the impact I'm trying to make and the things that I'm trying to do. Yeah, when you have your priorities sort of shifted like that, it just forces you to make quick decisions and not ruminate, because there literally isn't time. And there literally, regardless of what you have going on in your life, this is your life, you get to live it once, and there just isn't time to think about that junk.
Yeah, really, really not. And I love that you call it a forcing function, right? So really interesting, because if I reflect on my own experience, like I moved country relatively recently in the past few years, and actually I had to leave everything behind. I had to have everything stripped away. I'd also just left a job and was just starting to embark on what could a business look like for me. I had no specific plan. So really, everything falls away. And then it's like, well, actually, who is left here in the middle, right?
Yeah, that actually matters.
How has that changed the way that you define success within your life, would you say?
Maybe being a little bit more critical about the source of what defines success and who's telling me what's good versus sort of really thinking about for myself Like, is this impactful? Is this the right thing to do? Does this matter? I don't think every opinion ever thought needs to be out in the world. And, is it something that I actually care about? And is it something that is worthwhile for other people, if that makes sense? Not to make being a mom my whole personality, but one thing that I've thought about a lot recently is, as we're growing up, we depend a lot on positive validation. So you sort of get celebrated for like getting a good grade or doing something properly, and it's sort of hard not to do when you're a parent, like trying to get your kid to walk or something. But it's made me realize that we rely a lot on external validation. So you're only worth something or worth attention if you've completed something that is worthwhile in the eyes of other people, and we get sort of hardwired that way from the very beginning. And I think that's unhealthy and sort of a generational habit that should maybe be unpicked.
You're right. We get so much validation from outside of ourselves. And actually, for lots of us, we don't develop a healthy sense of self. We come up into the world trying to figure out who we are through the eyes of other people. And I know in my own world, I assumed so many identities. All I wanted was to belong. Plot reveal, the only place that you're ever going to start to belong is when you actually belong to yourself. When you can rely on yourself not to reject yourself, right? And to validate yourself. Tell me, Michelle, for you, is that a journey that you've gone on? Would you say that you're good at that today?
No. I mean, I think it's very natural, right? To have grown up being, a people pleaser. I'm the oldest child of 3. Just all of those things mixed together. Again, with like school systems, sort of girls are sort of trained to do well, sit nicely, sit pretty. I have a friend whose daughter was told at nursery, like, she's bullying the other kid. And then she had to sort of unwrap that to say, actually, she's outspoken. She knows what she wants. And, I think just the framing of it all is just very deeply ingrained. So, no, I haven't perfected it. But I think that's something that the systems need to work on, but also we sort of need to work on ourselves.
Yeah, it's a sort of two-way thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's like my approach has been, okay, so what can I be responsible for within myself? And can I work on this? And, make the unconscious more conscious so that I can maybe more consciously choose different things, But obviously, you've gone through a big role change lately and becoming a mother. But how would you say, when it comes to you and, being a woman in leadership and stepping back into the workplace, and even before that, taking up space as a woman in leadership to begin with, how would you say that you've managed to navigate that?
I think it's so interesting coming back because I've realized that actually I do have things to say. I have things that matter to me, and actually I do have sort of knowledge and experience that matters. Whereas I feel like often we sort of are very careful to make sure that we know 100% of a subject before we sort of speak publicly on it. We were talking about it before, but most women decline opportunities to speak publicly or be featured in, any sort of speaking or featured in any type of content. And, 90% of men say yes. And I think it's partly because of, just wanting to be an expert at something before we sort of go out and say we know something. But actually, I think it's what you said around taking space, and actually the experiences do matter. They do culminate into something that is valuable. These are all points of view that deserve to be out there. And I think too often women or people self-select out because they feel like maybe they need to do more research or it needs to be refined a little bit more. And I do think to an extent that's why, among female founders, there's a minority. Obviously, there's a huge systemic issue in terms of how funding gets sort of deployed. But I think a lot of it is also like women sort of tinker a lot in their minds, and we sort of decide what's good enough and what's not before anybody else has a chance to tell us what's good enough and what's not, and we sort of are our own harshest critic. And that's why I think a lot of amazing ideas, products, things don't get put out into the world because we're sort of refining it ourselves and then decide it's sort of not good enough. And I think we all should lower the bar in terms of what good enough looks like, and just let more of these ideas and more of these opinions and more of this knowledge just out into the world. And that's sort of what is in the back of my mind in terms of, actually, I know enough about this to have like a fairly strong opinion on it. And, these are the reasons why you should listen.
And truthfully, that's where Bloom, I first created it as a leadership accelerator for women, specifically because I still today, I coach men and women. It's not that I just coach women. I was watching, the same input material, me as coach, and the men I was coaching were like, great, off I go. And the women were like, wait, what? And I was like, wow. I can really recognize that from my own journey. And the way that I would hold myself back and say I'm not deserving of that yet. I've worked with many women who are being offered jobs and they think they're being offered too much money and they're terrified by, they actually turn down the offer because they don't think they're worth that salary yet. And that's a big problem for us. It's something that makes sense based on the society we find ourselves in. But this is where we have to be part of dismantling what our experience is. As long as we are embracing perfectionism versus embracing experimentation and being prepared to get things wrong, we're going to stay stuck. But experimentation, to be able to do that, you have to be sort of creating safety for yourself whilst you're doing it, right? What's your relationship been with experimentation in that way to try to, I guess, work against the perfectionism that courses through our veins?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I think it's sort of what you said before in terms of the cringe that comes from sort of hearing yourself speak. But if you sort of immerse yourself in it over time, you sort of confront maybe the anxiety of what that could have been or the sort of negative feelings around, what if I sound stupid? And actually, you know, looking back at it, it's actually, there was a lot of insightful stuff in there. But no, I would say, so an example of this is for a project recently, I had to go out and sort of find partnership opportunities and sponsorship for something. But I was really intimidated because I've never sold a thing in my life and I don't have that personality at all. But sort of reframing it to actually, if I sort of think about this as a recruiter or from an HR point of view, you know that you need to put out, 10 applications for one potential yes to an interview. I guess what I'm saying is if we reframe failure, so I sort of said to myself, actually, I need 10 rejections to get one yes. So I better get working on the 10 rejections pretty soon and sort of, again, just I think maybe removing the stigma of it as being failure as experimentation, sort of what you were saying in terms of, you know, it's a no isn't the end of the world and you haven't sort of failed yourself and your parents and all of those that have come before you, you know, you're testing something out and that's okay.
In my own career, I know when I started to see things as case studies, you know, like there were a couple of jobs that I took and I thought, wow, okay, this is not what I expected and it can go one way or the other. So I'm going to go all in and either way, it's going to be an amazing case study. It's either going to be a case study of where I realized that I couldn't fix whatever it was, or it's going to be like, wow, what an amazing thing that you did there. Either way, it's an amazing thing, right? Even if in the end I'm saying, actually, this is too much for me and I have to step out, right? I don't know. Have you had any of those moments yourself?
You were talking about sort of moving to a new city and stripping it completely down. And I think every time I've done it 4 times now. I moved to Germany, the UK, to New York, and then I did a stint in university as well. But just arriving to someplace completely new, I think, to your point of it being a case study, you sort of arrive and you think about, like, what have I done?
Yes.
And nothing is familiar, like nothing is what you expected. Pretty much every time we arrived or I arrived somewhere, it's sort of the opposite of what I wanted or expected. And I sort of have a couple days where I'm just regretting everything immensely. At the end of your life, are you going to sort of regret trying new things and putting yourself out there and living in new cities, or are you going to regret having not done it? I think the latter is probably much more likely. At least I tried it, and I'm not sort of sitting with the regret of not doing something. I'm sitting with like the knowledge that taking action gives you, and you're so much richer for it.
Like there's a book by Bronnie Ware on the biggest regrets of the dying, and I remember 2 of them always. One, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, and I wish I'd been able to say what's on my mind or something like that, right?
Yeah,
like it's literally like, it's authenticity. It's living true to yourself and having the courage to be who you are that we actually regret the most, right? Like, be above other things. We're not regretting, did it work out for me in that city? Well, you know, maybe not, right? Yeah. But we certainly do regret not living lives that feel true to us.
And I think that's true of like partners. I think it's true of work. And you can, I think to everything that you were saying about just being in tune with yourself, if you sort of stop and sort of think about it and listen.
Yeah, massively.
It sort of comes from that, right?
And a big part of authenticity is found in speaking what's on our mind and finding space for that. So I'm interested to know, in the work that you do, like how have you been able to go on that journey, what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way around self-advocacy or even just having those challenging conversations when you have to?
So a lot of my role is sort of looking at different situations. We're sort of dropped into lots of different types of companies and assessing sort of what the problem is. And I think what I'm trying to do more is, rather than sort of justify a point or sort of share data on why something makes sense sort of empirically, I can sort of articulate why I think something is right or wrong just on the basis of having seen quite a lot, you know, in terms of just having power and the experience and knowing what I've done before and why it matters, if that makes sense. So we do a lot of recruitment and hiring, and a lot of times people will sort of look great on paper, or you'll sort of be lulled into maybe a false sense of security based on someone's experience and the logos that they have on their resume. A lot of recruitment is sort of digging deeper into, you know, the motivations of people, what the actual skills boil down to. And I think providing like a better point of view into pushing back, just having more confidence based on having done it now.
Yeah. I guess if I think about myself earlier in my career, I would find myself holding back a lot. I would be comparing myself to maybe other people who were sitting around the table with me, and I'd be thinking, well, my brain's different to theirs, and maybe, oh gosh, I wish I could think like this, or oh gosh, right? That only changed when I had grown enough within myself to give myself permission to be myself and worked on the sort of shame that was holding me back from taking up space. That was my challenge when it came to taking up space. But everybody's different, right? Was there anything that was a real challenge for you that you managed to overcome in that area?
Well, I would agree with that, because if I'm sort of here, I tend to lean very diplomatic. Like, I sort of understand different perspectives. I think you have to be when you lived in a lot of places, maybe grown up seeing a lot of cultures the way I have. As you know, I'm a child of immigrants, so sort of growing up was always adapting to what you sort of saw in the environment around you. So in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, you're trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think especially people leaders or people who are working in sort of management roles, you're sort of trying to reconcile your own beliefs with what they're saying. But I think, again, more recently, it's actually, no, I disagree. And I don't actually need to sort of justify it with data. I just know that you're wrong, and I think that's an opinion that needs to be sort of expressed as well. And I'm going to say it, even though it might make things more inconvenient for you, or it might not sort of align with the narrative that you're trying to weave. It's important to sort of understand where that comes from. It just that balance of being agreeable versus honest.
But no is such a hard word, isn't it? Right? Yeah. Like, when we're not used to saying it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know there's plenty of people out there who find it very easy to say no. I was never one of them until I had to put in the hard yards to learn how to say no. Was there a moment where you just set until you were like, no, actually it's just no? What changed in that moment that you were actually able to just say no?
I don't think anything changed. Again, I think it's just how people sort of accept you as a them problem, not a you problem. Mm-hmm. And I think no is a full sentence, and that's enough. And I mean, if you need to sort of add justification around it, it's, again, you're sort of a very rational, logical person, and that's enough. And you don't need to apologize for the facts.
But for anybody who is watching or listening, I do want to acknowledge that, you know, the idea of just saying no is, I get, a little bit of a challenge when you're not used to doing it. So I would just say, build the muscle incrementally over time, right? Like, start in lower stakes situations. And if you need to explain it in the beginning, that's okay. If you need to justify it, that's okay. Put yourself on like a recovery program so that your no gets cleaner and purer, right? Like, it's like you could start with all the explanation, that's okay. But then, like, we'll give you 3 months of that and then say less. And then 3 months of that, say less. Because what you're doing is you're training your nervous system to get better and creating safety each time. Because even if you say a no that's got a lot of explanation and you realize that the relationship still survives with the colleague, great, you've now learned that I can actually say no and not be rejected. Therefore, the next time maybe I can say no with a little bit more, with a little bit more, with a little bit more, right? Yeah. And I think there's something quite magical in building the muscle, right?
Yeah, so wise.
So Michelle is working with investing in and scaling in lots of different companies, working for a VC. And so companies obviously go through growth and they shrink and things like that. So you must be quite used to navigating setbacks and challenges and facing different things with those companies as they grow. Whether it's professionally or personally, how do you bounce back from setbacks? How do you navigate those?
Again, it sort of goes back to what the facts are in terms of it's not sort of a personal failure if things don't work out well. And I think sort of seeing companies go up and down, there's a lot of this it's impossible not to. If you're a human being with any sort of shred of empathy, it's hard not to sort of think if I had done X differently, maybe the outcome here would have been differently. And maybe we wouldn't have had to, I don't know, let go of 30 people, or maybe we wouldn't have had to sort of rebuild our entire leadership team, or maybe we would have built this part of the company better and we wouldn't have had to sort of break it down and then build it back up again. And I think just, again, removing yourself from what the actual root cause is. But something that I've been talking to quite a few of our portfolio companies about. So we spend a lot of time in performance season talking about weaknesses and sort of this is how you should fix X thing because you're not doing as well in it. But so much more can be gained from sort of strength-based conversations, and I'm sure you encounter this a lot more in your work, but telling someone that they're good at something and that they can be good at something is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think there's tons of science behind it. There's tons of data behind it. Like actually, whether or not you believe it, but telling someone that they have the capacity to do something or that they're special or that they have something sort of the X factor in them to accomplish something will actually propel them to do it. Whereas sort of tinkering with sort of anxieties and mistakes and shortcomings of people will maybe result in some sort of short-term improvement in performance, but it actually will not result in sort of anything meaningful long-term. So when it comes to companies or leading teams or sort of having performance conversations, I just think there's so much more to be gained from thinking about it from like, actually, what am I sort of gifted in being able to do and what can I bring to it based on what I'm good at versus actually these are all the things I need to get better at, and I'm bad at this and I need to fix that and I need to, I don't know, become more fit and thinking about shortcomings as opposed to sort of maximizing on strengths, if that makes sense.
And you also mentioned something there that I love, which is about the idea that speaking life into others, right? Like what we say is so powerful and so important. Would you say that there have been those sort of guardian angel whisperers along the way for you who've helped you build your relationship with yourself?
Looking back on my career, there have been people who've taken a punt on me, like when I haven't really felt like I was qualified or sort of ready to do something. But, again, they've sort of said, I believe in you and you can do it. And I think everybody should be out there seeking out those people for themselves. And if you're in an environment where a work context where maybe there aren't those people there for you, then I think it's worth going out and looking for that because it can be truly life-changing in terms of just one person who sort of believes in you to do more than you thought you could.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just means becoming a little bit more aware and open because like these angels are all around us whispering, but sometimes we can't hear them. So, I would just say as we move, be open to those whispers because you don't know where they're going to come from.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest moments of inspiration in my life and career have come when the person had no idea what they were saying. It didn't mean anything to them. I make sure that whenever I become aware that somebody said something that actually changed the course of my life in a positive way, I actually make sure that I go to that person and say, do you realize that you did this? Do you realize that if I think about the amount of people that used to be like, hey, you should be a coach. Or do you make videos talking about blah, 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 blah? Like for years I was like, yeah, cool. But really deep in my soul, that was part of what really built then the confidence and self-belief to be able to take those baby steps out into the world, doing something where I really feel like I get to bring my heart to the world.
Amazing.
So, I do want to ask, if we think about life in terms of seasons, like seasons of growth, seasons of discarding, seasons of decay, even winter, spring, summer, whatever. Which season of your career would you say shaped you the most?
I'm sort of mid-career and I would sort of define it as maybe winter. And, coming back, it just feels like your insides have been rearranged, you're chemically different. It was sort of a phase of reinvention and it's been hugely sort of powerful in terms of, again, reconciling who was I and who am I going to become because you are literally sort of chemically
a different person.
Yeah. And the world has sort of moved on and, when I was on maternity leave, AI or generative AI sort of really took off. And so I came back and everything was completely changed. And I think also your own like obsolescence when you've been maybe out of work for a while, it doesn't have to be on leave, but for anyone that sort of stepped out and thinking about coming back, it's a very difficult thing. It's so intimidating, right? Because the world moves on without you as it should. But then to sort of re-find your place in all of that, and again, sort of reconciling your own value, because work is literally other people telling you how valuable you are. That's like what your salary is, right? So just, am I of value? And of course you are, but I think it's what you tell yourself and the narrative that you tell yourself versus what you sort of allow others to dictate for you has been a really interesting journey over the past year.
Absolutely. And I mean, whether about that or something before, what's one thing that you wish you learnt sooner in your career?
I think the one thing that has made a huge difference is like the art of the cold call, or just asking. Like there's no harm in just asking. And the number of times that's paid off so well. And again, it's sort of just this building out your like rejection and failure muscle. What's the worst thing that can happen if you just ask? And yes, maybe it might land the wrong way, or you might not sort of deliver it perfectly every time, but that's made a huge difference. But I don't know what else I would have changed or would have made the biggest difference.
I love it. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you for your honesty and your wisdom and your straightforwardness.
Yeah.
Because honestly, my goal with this podcast is really to create real conversations with real women who are in the trenches somewhat, out there trying to balance however many roles we have, right? Whatever it is. But, I learned so much from my conversations with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. If you have liked this episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear some of what we were talking about. Go and check out our other episodes, and then also head over to ourtimetobloom.com to find out more about Bloom and how you can get involved.